The next video we're going to do is on upper cross syndrome. This is a very, very common entity. It's something I find it's almost ubiquitous in society. It has to do with postural instability, muscle weaknesses that develop, and of course subluxations and the like that are sending the wrong signals to those muscles because they're getting the wrong signals because of improper positioning and so forth. Again, like the lower back, upper cross syndrome means there's something tight and something weak. So here's the cross. So now we're looking at the front muscles being weak, the upper middle back muscles being weak, the neck muscles being very tight, and the front of the neck being very tight. So the first thing I look for when we're looking at an individual, obviously, is their mobility or flexibility, because that will tell me something about what muscles might be at fault. So the normal for the neck is, if you look at me from the side, should be able to touch your chin to your chest very comfortably. As you can see, I do. Mouth closed, tuck your chin straight to your chest. Extension, which is going backward, you should be easily able to, mouth closed, lift straight up, looking up at the ceiling. And that's number 2, so that's extension. So that's full range, so that looks good. Then turning or rotation. You should be able to easily, with your arms behind your back, turn your head and reach your shoulder. So that was my right side, and then that's my left side. So that's about 90 degrees in both planes, and that's good rotation. And those are symmetrical, so we're looking for symmetry. Since we've got 2 movements there that match, we can look for symmetry. If you only go halfway one way, halfway the other way, that's about the same, not asymmetric. So I'm going to be looking for things structurally inside the spine that are probably more at fault. If you can turn your head almost fully one way and not the other way, it might be more an imbalance in the musculature on one of those sides that's creating that asymmetry. And of course those joints are still affected by it, so they're definitely going to need to be assessed and dealt with. So that's the lateral flexion is the last one. So the last one is lateral bending. So what we're going to do is look at you with, again, your hands at your side or just sitting. How far can you tilt your ear to your shoulder? Should be about 45 degrees. Notice that when I do that, my head does not turn. My nose is still straight forward. So one of the things I look for with that lateral flexion moment is if people have a problem with it, they do this. They get turned with the side bend, and that's because they can't side bend. So that's a structural problem in the neck. It's something wrong, with the lateral bending muscles that are facilitated probably by something wrong in the neck or some of the joints somewhere in the body, or an asymmetry of posture, etc. Those are the things I'm going to look for, which is one of the reasons we assess posture every time we see somebody, and especially on their first visit. So now we've looked at the mobility portion. Now again, like the lower back and all the rest, we want to look for tension in those muscles, and we're also going to look for stability or functional strength in those muscles. So the primary thing we see with upper cross syndrome is we find inhibition of the deep neck flexors. So these are guys called the sternocleidomastoids. Everybody can see that, and when you turn your head one way or another, it kind of pops out a little bit. That's a neck flexor, but it's a bigger one and it's more superficial. Those are usually increased in their activity, so they're usually sore to touch in most people that have this problem. But deep to that, way right against the spine, something we can't feel necessarily, but we can test for, is functional stability in the neck flexor. So I'll show you that in a minute. The other thing I'm looking for, again, is mobility or flexibility in the muscles. So what I generally am going to do is I'm going to be palpating all the muscles and feeling them, asking patients typically when a muscle's tight and it's been contracted for a long time, it's doing more work than it's supposed to, it will be sore to touch, or parts of it will be sore to touch. Typically, in this part, the upper trapezius is usually facilitated or increased in its activity, and when we press in there, they'll go, oh yeah, that does hurt. And it might be one side more than the other. For example, in my case, it's a little tender on the left side. I don't have any tenderness on the right. So that would tell me something about the structural stability of my spine, in particular, at least for today, that there's something going on in the left trapezius, although I don't really have this syndrome. The other thing I'll look for is sensitivity in the muscles on the side of the neck in here. The ones that bend you from side to side are called the scalenes. They're also accessory respiratory muscles. So they assist in heavy, deep breathing. So especially with sports activities, they're going to be helping you move the rib cage, which doesn't really move at rest. So when you're breathing normally, it's your belly doing most of the work. When you're athletic or moving, your chest will start to move. All right. So we'll look for, one, do they look prominent? So just by appearance. Two, are they tender to touch? When I just feel into that gutter right above the rib cage, I'll press in gently and say, is that sore? And they'll go, oh yeah, that's sore. That's painful there. Oh yeah, that's it. And they may have problems that are resulting from that, so they may get radiation or pain into their chest or an upper arm, etc. I'll look for that. I'll look for some other muscle groups to see if they're tight or imbalanced. The other thing I'll look for is when they're just sitting, is their general posture. Now what we chronically see with this, and this is why it's such a problem, is because people are sitting all day long, they develop a neck posture where they get a loss of curvature in their neck, so their neck becomes flat, and their head migrates forward. So in a normal stance, and I believe this is true for myself, I believe my ear is relatively close to my shoulder. Is that not right? So that's a normal stance. That's where your head should be positioned on your body. Your shoulders should be aligned with your head. What we commonly see is this. We call that forward head translation, which means that your head has migrated forward of the center of support. That's real critical for balance and stability. Basically, it's as if you're all day long looking down and trying to hold your head up, the way you head up, with the muscles in your back. So it's no wonder they get tight. So that is fixable through a variety of different means, and it's something we would look for in this syndrome. So now I'll try to demonstrate for you the upper crust syndrome pattern for the weakness component, which is going to be the deep neck flexors and then the muscles in the interscapular region. So here's what we do. We lay a patient down on their back, or person down on their back, and we ask them to tuck their chin to their chest. Some have difficulty even doing that, but tucking their chin to their chest and lifting the head and then just holding it. We do this for approximately 20 seconds. I'm just going to shorten that a little bit to about 10. And then I might manually ask them to hold their head against resistance and push as I try to push back. What I'm looking for is their chin to jut forward. I'm looking for them to just sort of let go. And typically, if they have this problem, within about 7 seconds or so, their head is shuddering, they're moving up and down, and they just let their head go down because it's that weak and it's that difficult for them to hold that position. Their interscapular muscles, what we do is we test them typically either laying on their back or standing. I have them hold their arm out like that. I try to push their arm forward. If I can do that with relative ease, or I see their shoulder blade move at all during that motion, it's a sign of interscapular weakness. And there's exercises we give to strengthen that. The primary one that we really focus on is that front muscle, because that is definitely weak. So we're going to stop that for a moment. I'm just going to show you what the forward head posture looks like on somebody else.